Καλησπέρα και από μένα. Θα είμαι σύντομη, γιατί ξέρω ότι όλοι είστε κουρασμένοι μετά τη σημερινή μέρα. Εγώ εκπροσωπώ το κομμάτι του Carbon Neutrality Strategy Group του EFET και την Task Force Emissions Trading, δηλαδή βλέπουμε το Fit for 55 και πάρα πολλά από τα ζητήματα που έχουμε συζητήσει σήμερα και έχουν αναφέρει οι συνομιλητές μου πολύ πιο ολιστικά. Θα με συγχωρέσετε για τη γλώσσα. Θα πρέπει να to switch to English now. Και οποιαδήποτε follow-up ερώτηση έχετε, θα μπορέσω να την απαντήσω στα ελληνικά. So for those of you who do not know us, we represent around 130 energy companies from across Europe advocating for competitive and well-functioning energy markets. And we also aim to make those markets work better through our standard master contracts, including a master PPA, power purchase agreement, and, of course, our electronic transaction data exchange standards. Now, let's start by briefly addressing the first part of the session's title. So, NECPs, a legacy of the clean energy for all Europeans package, are now set to adapt to the increased ambition of the Fit for 55 package, and we may briefly note two pillars of the latter. So, first one, revision of the EU emissions trading system, by means of a strengthened cap and an increased linear reduction factor as part of the Market Stability Reserve review, as well as by the connection of the European Union emissions trading system with whole new legislative proposals, including the one on the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And the greater penetration at the same time of renewable electricity in the member states' energy mixes, with the parallel development of markets in renewable and low-carbon gases via review and adaptation of RED II, the Renewable Energy Directive, and via new and recast hydrogen and gas decarbonisation legislation. So a strong and expanded emissions trading system giving a reliable and clear carbon abatement signal may underpin decarbonisation, provided it remains stable, it remains coherent, among sectors and energy carriers, including in the future heating, cooling, and transport. So the contribution of this carbon abatement signal to the decarbonisation will basically be facilitated by integration of the carbon border adjustment mechanism into the EU emissions trading system, along with the phase-out of reallocation of allowances. And this will ensure that the price of carbon-intensive imports into the EU reflects more accurately their carbon content, and then the international role of the emissions trading system is strengthened. Now, at the same time, the need for and design of financial support schemes for renewable energy carriers will have to be least distortive to the functioning of wholesale energy markets. And this basically means that any form of support needs to preserve incentives for renewable electricity generators to respond to the price signals sent by markets. And support will, of course, have to be allocated on a competitive basis, for example, without technology or size limitations. And finally, renewable and low-carbon qualities of gases are also a legitimate element of the revised EU decarbonisation targets, and to this end, separate markets featuring unhindered cross-border trade between member states in both certificates, or GO+, as we call them within EFET, validating renewable attributes and in underlying commodities of hydrogen and biomethane should be allowed to develop. And this principle should basically guide the Commission's proposals that we're seeing right now that we have to respond to for traceable renewable fuels of biological origin and for tracing the renewable origin of electricity used for the manufacture of electrolyzed hydrogen. And let's now briefly address the second part of our session's title. So we've already mentioned the pros of the emissions trading system and the need to competitively allocate financial support where needed. So a full-fledged market in renewable PPAs is another critical component for renewable electricity integration. And this comes with incentivization of renewable electricity generation in all wholesale market frames, like balancing to forward, to increase revenues and enable better dispatch decisions. So renewable PPAs can lock in revenues for renewable electricity project developers and producers, and hence accelerate long-term deployment of renewable technologies and ensure EU-wide security of electricity supply. So in the context of new projects, renewable PPAs represent an alternative to public financial support when equally ensuring guarantees on returns to lenders. And this is because most renewable electricity generators have high upfront investment costs and find it difficult to ensure investment from lenders unless the returns are guaranteed through financial support schemes. And from a buyer's perspective, PPAs serve as proof of the renewable origin of the electricity consumed and serve to fix long-term electricity costs. Now, GOs, guarantees of origin, lie at the core of renewable PPAs, certifying the renewable origin of the produced electricity and serving as a basis for claims to renewable electricity consumption. Now, to help bring down transaction costs and simplify negotiations for business users of energy seeking to agree on conditions of purchases of renewables, EFET, in partnership with a resource platform, has basically launched the first international standard CPPA for use in Europe. So, as with the already existing EFET Master Agreement, which basically stipulates the conditions of purchase or sale of bilaterally negotiated power and gas contracts, our CPPA standard provides legal certainty and ensures a smooth operational process. And we can, of course, discuss later how to create growth in this prospective RES PPA market, a fully-fledged RES PPA market. Now, EFET also produces guidance notes for national PPA markets that allow users to adapt the standard provisions to local requirements, including national laws and local market practices. Now, in the case of Greece in particular, we have understood that as part of the Greek power market reform plan, the ministry aims to legislate for the establishment of an organized, non-mandatory wholesale market platform to facilitate the development of a market for bilateral private renewable PPA contracts. And we view this prospective reform as a functional tool to promote the actual, the market-based development of future renewable capacity in Greece, provided that its design responds to actual market needs. And while we support the voluntary character of participation in the designed PPA platform, we also look forward to further details on the proposed mechanism, including details on the standard contracts. And now to conclude, reliable price signals from well-functioning and liquid wholesale power and gas markets can effectively lead Europe to a least-cost decarbonization pathway. We recognize that the current market setup of high prices and supply constraints is the first direct test of the extent to which Europe is committed to its net zero trajectory. The Fit for 55 is ultimately making its way to the legislative process, including but not limited to the proposed revision of the EU ETS, aspiring to make an EU-wide carbon price the longer-term driver for net fossil decarbonization across the European economy, encouraging uptake of least-cost emission reduction technologies and solutions, and ultimately facilitating what we refer to in the Brussels bubble as energy system integration. And these reforms and new measures will basically help us build on our existing EU-wide markets in energy commodities and related contracts, which have resulted from a long-term liberalization effort across the EU of 25 years or so. And at EFET, we're proud to be playing our part in helping those markets work better through the development of our PPA standard, of course. In line with Europe's carbon neutrality target, our renewable PPA standard helps to ensure that renewable electricity continues to grow, even as financial support, particularly for onshore wind and solar, is being phased out in certain jurisdictions. We also help markets work through our supporting work on the development and harmonization of electricity guarantees of origin schemes, and of course, with our promotion of the expansion and strengthening of carbon markets. So that's all from my side, and thanks a lot for your attention.